There is this really pervasive advice we tend to give couples,
Oh, yeah.
especially young couples who are, thinking about starting a family. We always tell them to sit down, look at the budget, communicate about your expectations.
Right. The whole kitchen table conversation.
Exactly. We treat the financial shock of having a baby like it's, I don't know, a project management challenge.
Like if you just color code your spreadsheet well enough, you're going to be fine.
Right. And it feels very private, very personal.
Who takes leave? Can we afford daycare? That sort of thing.
But I was reading through our sources for today's deep dive, specifically this new paper, and it really made me feel like that advice is, well, not wrong, but drastically incomplete.
Because there's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's like telling someone to just swim harder without mentioning they're caught in a riptide.
That is a very apt analogy. Because what we're unpacking today suggests that the third parent at that kitchen table isn't your mother-in-law or your boss.
It's the state legislature.
Exactly, the state legislature.
And the specific culture of the U.S. state you happen to live in.
So we are looking at a massive piece of research today. It just came out in Social Science Research.
By Kelly Musick and Widening Jeong.
Right. And they've done something really ambitious here. They didn't just look at the motherhood penalty.
Which we already know exists, right?
We do. But they asked a bigger question. Does the level of sexism in your specific U.S. state actually determine how big that financial penalty is?
And the answer they found is honestly startling. I mean, it turns out geography is destiny in a way a lot of us probably don't want to admit.
We're talking about structural sexism here and how it actively reshapes your bank account the exact moment you go from a duo to a trio.
Before we get to the numbers, and there are some pretty scary numbers in this study, we really need to establish why we should trust this specific paper.
Sure.
Because I feel like you and I see a wage gap headline every other week. What makes this one stand out?
It's really the scale and the methodology. Musick and Jeong didn't just take a snapshot of, say, 2024. They built a data set spanning 40 years.
40 years.
Wow. From 1982 all the way to 2020. And they looked at over 87,000 different sex couples.
87,000 couples. That is basically a small city.
It is. But here is the crucial part. They used what are called fixed effect models.
Okay, unpack that for us in plain English.
Right. So it means they didn't just compare a mom in Alabama to a completely different mom in New York.
Oh, I see.
They tracked the exact same couples over time.
So they have the before and the after for the very same people.
Precisely. They watched these couples when they were childless, dual earners, and then watched what happened to those exact same people as they transitioned into parenthood.
Which filters out all the noise.
Exactly. Personality differences, career ambition, all of that. We are seeing the pure effect of that parenthood turning point within a very specific environment.
That is so much more powerful. Because you can't just argue, oh, well, maybe women in this state just aren't as career-focused.
Because you're comparing the woman to her former self.
You're watching her own personal trajectory change in real time. Okay, so to make this comparison work across the country, they had to somehow measure the environment itself.
Right.
And they used this term, structural sexism, which I have to admit sounds a bit academic, maybe a little buzzwordy.
It does sound like a buzzword, but they actually built a highly rigorous index to measure it.
How so?
Well, it's important to understand this isn't about measuring whether people are rude to women on the street. It's about power in institutions.
Okay.
They built a composite score for every single U.S. state based on 3 specific pillars.
Walk us through those pillars, because I think this is where these invisible forces really start to become visible for you listening.
The first pillar is economic. But it's not just the wage gap.
What else is in there?
They looked at the employment gap. So who is actually participating in the workforce and occupational segregation?
Occupational segregation is a huge one. That's basically asking if the women in this state are being funneled into pink-collar jobs.
Right. Is the economy of the state structured in a way where men work in high-paying industrial or tech sectors, while women are clustered in education or care roles that pay significantly less?
And if a state has a high degree of that separation, it scores higher on the sexism index.
Exactly. So that's the labor market.
What's the second pillar?
The political domain. And this one is stark. It's simply the percentage of men versus women in the state legislature.
Which is literally just who writes the rules.
That's exactly it. It's a direct proxy for representation. If 85% of the people writing childcare laws, reproductive health laws, and tax laws are men, that state scores high on structural sexism.
Because it signals that women are just not in the room where it happens.
Exactly.
And the third one, when I was reading it, felt the most personal, I guess, the cultural and religious domain.
This is what you might call the air you breathe factor. They looked at the prevalence of conservative religious affiliation in the state.
Specifically evangelical Protestantism, right?
Right, which historically correlates with more traditional gender ideologies. But they also brought in survey data on general public attitudes.
Like what kind of attitudes?
They looked at the percentage of people in a state who agree with statements like, preschool kids suffer if the mother works.
Wow. Which is such a loaded sentiment. I mean, if you are a working mom in a state where 60% of your neighbors genuinely think you are harming your child by having a job.
That is a heavy psychological weight.
It's immense pressure.
It is. And they also included access to reproductive health care, specifically abortion access, as a measure of women's autonomy.
Okay, so when you blend these three things, the economy, the politics, and the culture, you get a map of the U.S.
And the map looks pretty much how you might expect if you follow U.S. politics.
Yeah, I imagine there's a very clear clustering.
There is. The high-sexism states, the ones with the biggest wage gaps, the fewest women in power, and the most traditional attitudes, are heavily concentrated in the South.
Places like Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, West Virginia,
Yes.
and the low-sexism end of the spectrum.
Those clustered in the Northeast. Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut.
Now, I do want to be very careful here and make sure we are just reporting on the data impartially. It's really easy to slip into stereotypes and say everyone in the South is sexist.
Oh, not at all. And that is a vital distinction the researchers make.
Right,
These are measures of broad structures, not individuals.
right.
You could be a highly progressive, feminist dad living in Mississippi.
But you are still operating within an economy and a political system that scores high on this index.
Exactly. The structural reality exists completely, regardless of your personal feelings or politics.
Okay, so we have the map, and we have the tracker on these 87,000 couples.
Right.
Now we get to the collision point. The baby arrives.
It's a big moment.
What is the baseline here? Like, if we ignore this state-by-state differences for just a second, what happens to the average couple in America when they have a kid?
We see the universal parenthood penalty. It's everywhere, and it is harsh.
Give us the numbers.
In this data set, before having kids, wives contribute about 41% of the total couple earnings on average.
So not quite half, but they are very clearly crucial economic partners.
41% is significant. That's the mortgage, that's the car payments.
Definitely.
Then the first child is born. 1 year later, that share drops to roughly 31%.
So she loses 10 percentage points of her share of the household pot.
Which is huge. That's effectively a 20 to 25% decline in her relative economic standing in her own household.
And just to reiterate, this is an average across the entire country.
Whole country, yeah.
I think the knee-jerk reaction a lot of people might have here is, well, yeah, she had a baby.
Right.
Maybe she's on unpaid leave, which is a whole other structural issue, of course. Or maybe she cut back her hours. It feels somewhat inevitable.
A dip is inevitable, yes. Biology alone dictates a physical recovery period.
Sure.
But what this study explicitly shows is that the depth of the hole you fall into depends entirely on that map we just talked about.
And this brings us to the core finding of the deep dive.
Yeah.
The interaction between that state sexism index and the earnings drop.
It's the smoking gun of the entire study. The researchers found that the decline in a wife's earnings share is significantly steeper in states with high structural sexism.
Give us the direct comparison they made. They looked at West Virginia versus Vermont, didn't they?
They did. So imagine two identical couples, same age, same race, same general career setup.
Okay.
One couple lives in West Virginia, which has a high sexism score. The other lives in Vermont, which has a low score.
Right.
The study predicts that the earnings decline for the new mother in West Virginia is nearly 50% steeper than for the mother in Vermont.
Wait, 50% steeper? Just based on the state line?
50%, yes.
That is absolutely massive. I mean, that is the difference between saying we need to tighten our belts for a few months and saying mom's career is effectively over.
Exactly. It transforms what should be a temporary adjustment into a permanent divergence. In Vermont, the drop is shallower and the career recovery is plausible. In West Virginia, the floor just falls out.
I really want to push on the why here. Because I can hear you listening and thinking, well, maybe childcare is just cheaper in Vermont or something.
It's a fair question.
But the index measures so much more than just childcare costs. This suggests that the pressure to quit or cut back is coming from all sides in those high sexism states.
It's basically a death by 1,000 cuts scenario.
How so?
Well, in a high sexism state, you might be dealing with a total lack of paid leave on the political side.
Right.
You might be facing a job market that just doesn't offer flexible roles for women on the economic side.
Because of that occupational segregation.
Exactly. And then you go to church or the grocery store, and the cultural vibe is basically, why aren't you home with the baby?
Which is the cultural domain.
Right. All those macro-level forces push in the exact same direction. Mom should step back.
Meanwhile, in the low sexism state, maybe the state laws are slightly better, the pay gap is smaller, and your neighbors don't judge you for working. So you hold on.
You hold on, and that holding on makes all the difference for your lifetime earnings.
Now, here's the part of the study that actually made me gasp.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Because usually when we talk about the share of household earnings changing, there are two moving variables, right?
Right.
Mom earns less or dad earns more. We always hear about the provider bump.
Oh, the provider bump.
The idea that once a man has a kid, he goes into absolute overdrive to provide for his family.
It is a very popular myth.
A myth. So what did the data actually show?
The researchers separated the earnings out. They looked at the husbands and the wives completely individually.
Okay.
And that widening gap we see in these high sexism states, it is driven entirely by women earning less.
Wait, entirely? But what about the men?
The line is flat,
Flat, like statistical noise flat.
completely unresponsive across all 40 years of data, across all 50 states. Husbands' earnings do not significantly budge when they become fathers.
You're kidding.
They don't go up. They don't go down. They literally just stay on the exact same trajectory they were on before the baby arrived.
Hold on, this breaks my brain a little bit. We are told constantly that men feel this immense societal pressure to provide once they have kids.
Culturally, yes, we say that.
You're telling me that economically, they're just on autopilot.
Economically, yes. And this is honestly the most damning evidence against the idea that these are purely private family decisions.
Because if it were a strategy...
Right. If a couple sat down and said, okay, we need to maximize our efficiency, you might expect the dad to ramp up his work hours while the mom ramps down.
Or maybe both ramp down to share caregiving.
Exactly. But that's not what happens.
The mom falls off an economic cliff, and the dad just keeps walking down the sidewalk like nothing changed.
Precisely. The high sexism environment heavily suppresses the woman's labor, but it puts absolutely zero pressure on the man to change his behavior,
It just reinforces that gendered role for her as the caregiver.
while allowing him to remain the quote-unquote ideal worker, totally untouched by his home life.
It's almost like the state-level sexism is a weight, but it's only tied to her ankles. He's walking around in the exact same gravity as before.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. And what's wild is this holds true even in the 2010s.
Really?
Yeah, we aren't just talking about 1982 here. Even in the most recent decade of the study, men's earnings remain stubbornly flat across that transition to parenthood.
So let's play devil's advocate. If you were listening to this right now, maybe you're a woman with a master's degree, maybe you're in a high-powered career,
Sure.
you're probably thinking, okay, this is terrible, but it doesn't really apply to me. I have leverage, I have education, I can negotiate my way out of the state-level vibe.
Ah, the meritocracy defense. We really love to believe that our individual achievement shields us from systemic problems.
Does it?
The data says absolutely not.
Nothing.
Nothing. The researchers tested this specifically. They looked for moderating factors, things that should, in theory, soften the blow.
Like what?
They looked at women with college degrees versus those without. They looked at race and ethnicity. They looked at the age of the mother at the time of the first birth.
I'm really hoping you're going to tell me the college degree helped at least a little.
It did not.
Oh.
The interaction was statistically insignificant. A college-educated woman in a high sexism state faces the exact same exacerbated penalty pattern as a woman without a degree.
That is incredibly depressing. You do everything right, you get the degree, you build the career, but you still can't out-educate the structural environment you live in.
You really can't, and if you think about it practically, it makes sense.
How so?
Well, your master's degree doesn't magically create a daycare slot in a childcare desert.
True.
Your PhD doesn't force a traditionalist boss to let you leave at 4 p.m. Your college degree definitely doesn't change the state legislature's vote on paid family leave.
Because those are environmental constraints.
Exactly. If the infrastructure isn't there, your personal qualifications can't conjure it into existence. Individual privilege just does not shield women from the structural environment of their state.
It really drives home the point that the whole lean-in brand of feminism has a hard limit. You can lean in all you want, but if the floor underneath you is rotten, you're still going to fall through.
The structure eats individual strategy for breakfast.
We do have to talk about the timeline, though, because this study covers 1982 to 2020.
Right.
Surely things have gotten better overall. I mean, we have more women in office now. We have so much more awareness.
Well, there is good news and bad news on that front.
Give me the good news first.
The good news is that, yes, the absolute scores on the sexism index have definitely improved. States are, on average, measurably less sexist today than they were in 1982.
Okay, the water level has gone down. I'll take the win where I can get it.
Right. But the bad news is that the relationship between sexism and earnings, the actual strength of that penalty, has not weakened at all.
Wait, really?
In fact, the data suggests the effect might actually be slightly stronger in the 2010s than it was in the 1980s.
How does that math even work?
Yeah.
We are less sexist overall, but the sexism hurts your wallet more.
It essentially means that while the overall environment has improved slightly, the cost of being in a quote-unquote bad environment is higher than ever.
So the economic divergence between living in a high sexism versus a low sexism state remains incredibly potent.
Exactly. And perhaps the scariest part of the timeline data is the persistence of it all. The researchers actually looked 10 years down the road post-birth.
So the kid is what, in 4th or 5th grade?
Right. And that initial earnings gap caused by your state's environment, it doesn't snap back.
It doesn't recover.
No. If you took that massive hit in year one simply because you lived in a high sexism state, you are highly likely to still be trailing 10 years later. It sets a lower baseline for your entire working life.
It's a scar. It's not just a bruise.
It is a permanent scar on your lifetime earnings potential.
So when we zoom out and look at all of this, it fundamentally changes how we have to think about financial planning and family planning.
It really does.
We spend so much time culturally telling women to choose the right partner. Make sure you marry someone who supports your career. Marry someone who does the dishes.
Which is valid advice.
It is very valid advice. But this study implies there is another choice that is just as critical, if not more so.
Where you choose to live.
Exactly. If you are a young couple planning to have kids, and you are debating between a job offer in Massachusetts and a job offer in Alabama.
It's no longer just a question of whether you prefer mountains or beaches.
Right. It's literally a question of, do I want to take a 20% hit or a 40% hit to my lifetime earnings?
It totally reframes migration as a major financial portfolio decision. We so often move for a lower cost of living, right? We say, oh, housing is so cheap in this state.
But if that state has high structural sexism, you might just be paying for that cheap house with your future income.
That is essentially the trade-off the data shows.
That is such a heavy realization. The rent might be cheap, but the patriarchy tax is incredibly high.
That is a bumper sticker waiting to happen. But yes, that is the reality of the macro-level factors filtering into your private life.
And I just can't stop thinking about the men in this study. That completely flat line.
It haunts me a little bit, to be honest.
It suggests that for all our modern talk about involved fatherhood, the pure economic reality of being a dad really hasn't changed since 1982.
It really suggests that the revolution in gender roles has been incredibly one-sided. Women have changed everything about their lives, their education, their work hours, their economic contribution.
But men, economically speaking, haven't moved an inch.
And the state's structures are seemingly designed to keep it exactly that way.
So here's the thought I want to leave everyone listening with today. It's a bit of a provocation, but I think the sources demand it.
Let's hear it.
If men's work lives and earnings are totally unaffected by becoming parents, regardless of where they live, regardless of what decade it is, are we really having an honest conversation about parenthood?
Or is parenthood just a polite euphemism we use to hide the fact that we are systematically penalizing mothers?
Right. And if state policies shape this entirely, does that mean your zip code is actually the most important financial decision of your life?
Even more than who you marry. It's a profound question. And until we see that flat line for men start to move, until they start taking the hit, or until the state supports women enough that they don't have to, we're really just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic.
And getting paid 30% less to do it.
Exactly.
This has been a heavy deep dive, but a necessary one. If you are looking at Zillow right now, maybe pull up that structural sexism map alongside it.
It might genuinely be the most profitable research you do all year.
Thanks for joining us for this conversation. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.